Hi, I'm Stuart Mann, and I'm looking forward to taking you back to the feature today. Before we get there, just the obligatory everything you need to know about me in one slide. So I'm an agile coach at the largest bank in Africa. I look after the agile transformation in the area of the bank. Also, I'm a compulsive marathon runner. So I've run quite a few marathons. Father of two girls, husband of one wife, and a trainee feminist. There may be a correlation there. And have in fact seen a DeLorean in real life. This was during a 50-kilometer run in an area called Mpumalanga in South Africa, where I live. Great. So let's get to it. So to get us going, I'd like you to consider the difference between an output and an outcome. And in order to illustrate this, I'm going to give you a very simple scenario. So let's just say you're on the Microsoft PowerPoint feature team. I'm your product owner, and I come to you and I say, right, I want you to build me a new feature. And this feature is simply to create the shortcut key to add a bullet point list in PowerPoint. So yeah, anyone know what the shortcut key is to add a bullet point list in PowerPoint or Word? Obviously, it's not Control B because that will turn things bold. Okay, so it is a bit of a, why not? It is a bit of a trick question. You probably don't know the answer. There's no shortcut key. And the reason for that is that there's a better and easier way to add bullet points. And that is by doing an asterisk or a hyphen in the space. That will create a bullet for you. I'm sure plenty of us have done that before. So imagine instead of coming to you with this constrained feature, I rather came with an unconstrained feature saying, I want you to allow users to create bullet points as easy as possible. Okay. So the top one in red, output, the bottom one is an outcome. Okay, outcomes allow us to be creative in the solution that we come up with. So if I came up with this in green here and I asked you to do that, you might have thought about a shortcut key, but you probably would have come up with other creative options. Obviously at Microsoft, they did this and they came up with asterisks and a space. Better way of doing the same thing. So top one is an output, generally not great. Outcomes much better, and that's really going to be the focus of today's presentation. So we're going to be working through an example. This is a graph of call center calls to the call center. The majority of which, about 99% of these 3,500 calls to the month, were for password reset requests. Okay, so we're going to be working through this example. Before we get there, let's just define what is an epic, what is a feature, what is a user story. So you might have slightly different terminology, and that's perfectly fine, but this is just the terminology I'm going to be using during today's session. So you can consider a feature something like password reset. Okay, so that's from the end user's perspective, how are we going to get some value? The ability that I can reset the password without talking to the call center. Some examples of user stories that might be applicable for this specific feature: locking the account, validating the user, updating audit log, and potentially a whole lot of other stories might come of it. Now, if you think about it, I can build these incrementally. So we can write the code and automate a test to lock the account. We can then move on to validating the user, updating the audit log, and so on. With each story that's complete, I can retest my previous test, make sure I haven't broken anything, and I'm getting incrementally closer to realizing the value of the feature. As an end user, I don't care that you've locked my account, you've validated me, you've updated the audit log, until such time as I can log back into the system with my new password without talking into the call center. So I care about this as an end user, and user stories actually have system value in the context that I'm using it. Now, you might have an epic, something like improving self-service on the Gringotts banking system or whatever system it is. You don't have to for a feature, because features are chunks of their own functionality. But you could well do. Most of the features you work on will relate to a big epic, and these will mushroom out into lots and lots of features. Okay, another way potentially of looking at this, you'll take your favorite TV show and you could say the season. So Seinfeld, I'm using an example here. I think there were about 10 seasons of Seinfeld. Each season would be an epic. A feature would be an episode, and a user story would be a scene. So every scene in an episode. So we need all the scenes to be complete before we get the value of the episode, okay, which is the feature. Just another way of looking at it. Okay, so let's get philosophical for a second, and I'm going to ask you, what is the meaning of life? Okay, so I won't get too philosophical and very simply answer is to add value. So this is the meaning of life in our organizations, delivering products and services. And how do we add value? By delivering features. So that's really why the focus of the session is so heavily on features. That's how we are going to get value for our end users. So the next thing I want to look at is what is an hypothesis. There's a dictionary and a philosophical definition. I'll stick being with philosophical for a few seconds. A proposition made as a basis for reasoning without any assumption of its truth. So really this hypothesis is taking an experimental approach. Okay, we're going to run experiments, observe the results, and based on the feedback, we're going to take the necessary action. So for password reset, if we had to do an hypothesis here, we might say something like, if we provide users the ability to reset their own password, call center volumes will drop by 90%. Okay, that's the experiment that we're going to run by building password reset. And really the idea here is like taking a shower in a hotel that you've never ever used before. Okay, so if you've got traditional ways of work, waterfall, long learning cycles, it would be the equivalent of having one chance to get the temperature right with a shower. You turn the taps on and you might get the temperature perfect, not great chance of that happening, or it might be scorching hot or freezing cold, but you're going to have to live with it because you only got one chance. And obviously we don't do that. Okay, we're going to test the water, adjust and get the temperature just right. And that's really what we're trying to do with this incremental hypothesis-based experiment, this experimental approach, is we want to be able to test the water as frequently as possible. Faster and quicker we can test the water and respond, the faster and quicker we're going to get the temperature just right. Okay, so let's go back to password reset. Okay, we've got our feature hypothesis there. And the question I'm going to pose to you now is how can we break this into smaller features? Okay, and as we do so, what's the impact on our hypothesis? So don't worry, I've done this for you already. Okay, it won't tax your brain too much. You can sit back and relax. The good news is breaking up is easy to do, okay, when it comes to features anyway. So some potential ways we might break this up is by the method. So by email, by SMS text message, USSD, biometrics, there are various other ways as well we could look at offering the password reset service. Also by user type. So we might have a system where we've got normal users and we've got super users who've got administrative rights who maybe can approve billions of dollars worth of payments. Those super users, we want to make sure there's more security on a password reset than for a normal user where there's much less risk if something goes wrong. Okay, another way is potentially by the channel. If you've got a browser and a mobile app, okay, that's another way we can go and split it. And or by scenario. So I've forgotten my password, I don't know what it is, or I do know my current password, but I just want to reset it. Okay, so various different ways that we can go and look at doing it. Now, if you had to, just on what I've got on the screen here, if you have to multiply these together, we've potentially got 32 different features because we can say password reset via email for a normal user on the browser where they know their current password, one feature. Okay, so, and that's really what we want to do because Lean 101, the smaller something is, the faster it's going to flow through our system. Therefore, the quicker we can test the water on the other side. Okay, so which one do we do first? Well, that depends on our priorities and the size, the relative size of these various different options. So let's just look at how this might work on a backlog. So it's a very simple backlog here. I'm sure yours are much more complex. We start off with password reset. Okay, and this is an iterative process. Password reset feature is a living thing. We're going to slowly go through the process and we might end up with something like this. Let's just keep it simple for the purposes of illustration. And we're going to say we're going to have password reset via USSD, via text message or email as our options. And in discussion, we realized that email is the easiest and it's also the most important. So nice, easy decision in terms of prioritization. And the other two options still sit in the backlog. And we're now going to go and do some work and start refining and spending some time on understanding password reset via email. Now, remember our original hypothesis was we get a 90% benefit. Here, we've adjusted it. We're only going to get 60% just with email. And obviously, we then expect we'll get the remaining 30% with the other two features. And we then go off and build password reset via email. Okay, so when do we know, or how do we know what the actual percentage drop is? Once we've released it, okay, into production, we can then observe the results on our call center logs, and hopefully we get that reduction. So let's just say we get a 90%. We thought we were going to get 60%. We got 90%. Fantastic. What happens to our backlog? Okay, obviously your backlog's going to have lots of other features there, all competing in a capacity constrained model. It just means that these other two password reset options now become much lower priority, and we might never ever do them, okay, because they're just not worthwhile. We've got all the value that we wanted from the email option. On the other hand, maybe we only get a 10%. So now this is not great. It doesn't automatically mean that these other two become more important. Maybe we have missed the mark and actually our consumers or our customers do want another option. However, it could be something different. We want to go and investigate first before we jump to that conclusion. Perhaps it's a case that we've built it so badly that it's easier to phone the call center than it is to do the self-service option. Or maybe our users just don't know about this new feature that's out there. So we need to do a marketing campaign and potentially train our call center agents to walk people through the process, through the self-service option. And we could maybe find one region or one demographic is not using the feature. So maybe we find millennials don't want to use email, only want to use a text message, or a specific country in the African context, Kenya, like to use USSD with M-Pesa and things like that. So we might find that if we want to satisfy the Kenyan market, we've got to go with the USDC option. And maybe that then becomes our second priority to do, where originally we were intending to do the text message option second. So really based on the results that we're observing, we then go adapt and adjust, okay, according to the results of the experiment that we've run. Now, the only other thing that you really need to add to your feature, if you're doing feature cards, whether these are virtual, I'm sure most people have to do virtual now, not physical, is the acceptance criteria. And some example acceptance criteria are over there. And really the first two are like your UAT. So the authenticated user must be able to reset their password and log back into the system without talking to the call center. A full log of all audit, password reset steps and activities must be kept for audit and security purposes. Okay, and the third one is a non-functional, which you can obviously build an automated test for. Password reset email must be sent within half a second of the user clicking submit. Now, these acceptance criteria, these will also evolve over time and involve conversation between your product owner, potentially other business stakeholders, and the IT team, the feature team that's going to be delivering the solution. Typically, if everyone's involved in the conversation and we go into the execution or the build phase shortly after the discussion, this is typically all the documentation you need at a feature level. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is another feature, a real life example, but this is a horrible caterpillar of a feature, and I want to show you how we managed to transform it into a beautiful butterfly. So I ran a feature writing workshop with one of the teams that I was working with, and I was rather disappointed that this was the feature that they brought to the table. I trained them a couple of months before that. They were clever people, good team, trying hard, and I was really disappointed to see the quality of the feature. So you can try and read what's on here. Absolutely no ways you're going to know what this team is trying to do. Half the people inside the room who are on the feature team about to deliver this, they didn't know what this was about. Okay, so always say a well-worded feature is I can read it as an outsider, as a coach. If I understand what you're trying to do, okay, that's a well-worded feature. Okay, so luckily our product owner was inside the room, and we were able to ask the product owner these 5 questions. So why are we doing this change? We need to update audit report fields for our customers. Why do they need the additional fields? So they can check for errors. Why do they check for errors? How does this work? So customers check the reports to prevent errors being processed. Missed errors waste lots of time and cause frustration. So what exactly is the current problem? Customers can't see all the relevant information on the audit report, so many errors are still processed. What is the intended result of this change? We'll reduce the error rate by 95%. 5 questions later, bam, we've got our feature hypothesis. Okay, so this will reduce the error rate by 95%. That was in the product owner's head the whole time. He might have even known it was there, but it was there. No one else in the room knew that this was actually the objective, the mission that we were trying to achieve. Okay. So we restated it. This is how we finished. That's just the text. You can easier to read than the messy handwriting. So if we enhance the audit report to include the relevant details for verification by the client, we will reduce errors by 95%. Now you can see subsequently, I crossed out, which will enhance the client experience. Yes, it should, but that's just noise. Let's just focus. It's very hard to prove the part I've crossed out. We can definitely monitor after we go live what impact did we have on those error rates. Okay. And actually, in retrospect, we should really have started with a reduced client foreign exchange transaction error rate by 95%. Okay, that would have allowed us to be creative in the solution. It may well be that updating the order reports was the best option, but I was in the room, so I can tell you no one else, including myself, thought of any other options. Okay, so by coming in specifically telling what and how, it diminishes the creativity, and we really want the diversity of thought in the teams to come up with the best solutions. So some of the benefits of this hypothesis-based approach. So the first one is it unleashes the creativity and inspiration for your teams. So if I had to ask you which one of these would you rather work on? So it is a leading question because one's in red, one's in green. But do you want to update some fields on audit report? That's pretty boring. However, reducing client error rates by 95%. Okay, that gives me a reason to get up in the morning. That's much more inspiring. It gives me a mission. You know, I can come home and tell my wife and kids, this is what I did for my company today. Okay, much more exciting than just updating some fields on an audit report. So once again, outcomes over outputs. Then the green is our outcome. Red is just a boring old output. So the next benefit is that by using feature hypothesis helps us to keep our features really, really small. Okay, the smallest chunk of value for the end user. So we can, and basically the question we're asking, there's always ways to go and increase it. In this context, the product owner had a few different ideas, wanted to fix a production defect and so on at the same time. Can't we lump it all together? Okay, yes, we could, but really the question that we ask back to the product owner is, do you want to have the feature done in 2 weeks or wait 2 months if we do all this other stuff? And nearly any business stakeholder will say, yeah, give me the value as fast as possible. Now, in the case of something like the production defect, we can refer it back to the hypothesis statement. Will fixing the production defect have any impact on our hypothesis? In this case, the answer was no, therefore we didn't do it. But we can put it onto the backlog. Who gets to prioritize the backlog? The product owner does. And I can tell you that this production defect over a couple of years later still hasn't been fixed because it's never been high enough priority. There's always been more important things to do than fix a cosmetic production defect inside the system. So really we want small and fast over large and risky. In the past, a feature of this size would have taken us 12 months rather, to deliver a year. Okay, this is in the pre-agile days. And the great news was that this one we did under 2 weeks. The team completed it under 2 weeks. And we were able to observe the results, and it ended up being 80%. We didn't get 95%, we got 80%, but that was deemed good enough in this scenario, and there were higher priority things to work on the backlog. So we didn't try additional features to try and get that remaining 15%. Yeah. Our next benefit is that it helps the team to learn together and to drive teamwork, the team working as a true team. So everyone's in the room inside the discussion. Everyone knows what needs to be done right now and what does not need to be done. Okay, we didn't need additional documentation. Didn't have to rehash the same decisions, people challenging the decisions afterwards or handoffs. So if it was just an analyst chatting to the product owner, there would have likely been a lot more conversation afterwards and lack of clarity afterwards. The product owner is also involved in all of the decisions. So he wasn't surprised and asked, hang on, where's my production defect at the end of the iteration? So really what we want to do is to get everyone inside the circle, okay, have the conversation. And just the reason why I've got the model aeroplane and the Starship Enterprise, sorry, the Millennium Falcon, rather, I'm getting my sci-fis mixed up there on the screen, or Lego version thereof. So developers like to think that they are creative. They'll tell you it's a creative job. But if you just are handing them specs, it's not creative. It's a mechanical, clerical type job. Doesn't mean it's not skilled. So assembling a model aeroplane or the Millennium Falcon, okay, requires an element of skill, but it's not creative, because whoever put together the plans, they were creative, but you just are assembling things. Okay, much nicer to actually be creative, and you want the diverse power of thought inside your team to come up with creative and come up with the best solutions possible. Okay. In terms of prioritization, our next benefit, so I say start with why, but don't start unless you know why. Okay, if no one can tell you why you're doing something, okay, don't do it. Okay, rather figure out why. So, and also if you can't write a feature hypothesis, you either don't know what you want or no one wants what you have. So nice, quick, easy test. Okay, should we actually do this feature or not? Okay, no one can explain to you. Pick something else with your backlog. I'm sure, like all of us, we've got way more demand than we are able to supply. And so really it's survival of the fittest over survival of the fattest, or the hippo, highest paid person's opinion, the loudest, the squeaky wheel, or any other method that comes through. Okay, so we really want our features to fight it out against and do whatever features are going to likely to result in the biggest benefit for our organization. And our last benefit is we can assess return on investment. Now, a lot of organizations, definitely the ones that I've worked with, they insist on having, in South Africa, so a rand value, okay? Think about a dollar value or whatever your currency is. Now, this is often incredibly hard to prove after the fact. So I'm highlighting this here by small changes that were done in a large system. 236 million, that's a lot of money, okay? Even though, even in rand terms, which is not the strongest currency in the world, it's still a significant amount of money. And these were all implemented. These were small changes that were done on like sort of 4-page positional papers, and the proven benefits afterwards were unknown. Okay, so no one was able to actually prove the exact benefits afterwards. And there's various reasons for that, very long cycle times. Also, it's often very hard. You do something, but how can you actually prove? You can show value often. So we can show, for example, did we reduce client error rates? Yes, we dropped them by 80%. If you had to show a rand value or dollar value against that, much, much more difficult to do. Okay, so let's get back to password reset. But before we do so, the final point here, we want objective metrics instead of fairy tales. Most business cases are fairy tales. We do this, we'll save all this money, but I've never ever worked in a business case where afterwards someone was able to say, yes, we achieved that, we got that saving. Okay, it's often incredibly hard to actually do it in financial terms, but we can show value in other ways. Okay, so let's go to password reset now. So remember, we said password reset. Here we had our hypothesis. We got 3,500 calls to the call center a month. We want to reduce them by 90% by adding a password self-service function. Okay, so this was actually the agile pilot on a large transactional banking system. Similar size features in the past would have taken about 2 to 3 years to deliver in a waterfall type environment. And this was delivered in 6 weeks. So this was fantastic news. We had a nice party with pizza and beer. A couple of people got on the company incentive scheme and got a boat trip to Mauritius off the back of password reset. So this was hailed as a great success. Okay, or was it? And unfortunately, it wasn't such a great success because the graph you're looking at here is about 12 to 18 months after we had the party. We released it and we declared success, had the party with pizza and beer. So we produced an output, declared success, gone on to all the other stuff, but we never achieved the outcome, which was actually reducing the call center volumes. And no one was particularly concerned. And actually the reason why this came up was because I was doing a talk at a conference and I wanted to use this as an example. And obviously I do use this as an example, but in a very different context to what I was originally intending. Okay, so produced an outcome, an output. We didn't produce an outcome and no one even checked that. So really hypothesis-based work helps us to ensure that we're always checking what are the results. And if we don't get the desired results, we keep on pivoting or until we get the results, or we decide we're going to stop because we're actually not able to go and do it. Okay. And so the gentleman on the screen here, just move my face, is Ron Kohavi. And he was referenced, first became aware of him in the DevOps handbook, where there was a statement towards the end of a chapter basically saying that only 1 in 3 changes when they started measuring them were successful. And I call this Kohavi's law, and it's pretty much a best case scenario that you've got. Okay, we often think that we're going to get value and it's a straight line process. When Microsoft's experimentation lab, when they start to evaluate the experiments they were running, they pretty much found that only 1 in 3 would yield a positive result. And 2 out of 3, therefore, they actually found that 1 in 3 would have no change, but obviously would add to your legacy code base. And 1 in 3 would actually make the system worse, would have a negative outcome. Okay, and I say Kohavi's law. And just a quote from them there, evaluating ideas with controlled experience was humbling. It showed how poor intuition and expert opinions are. And really I guess the key message here is that we want to use hypotheses so we can run experiments, we can evaluate the results, and we can actually see them and observe them and react accordingly to them. If you do want to read a bit more about this, I have written a couple of detailed blog posts on this topic. Okay, and then just to conclude, I guess is the way I started out, there was going to bookend with outputs versus outcomes. So for the last 20 or so minutes, you've been listening to me talk. The talk is complete. Hopefully you enjoyed it, okay, but it's just an output. And ideally, the outcome that I would like to achieve is that this gives you some thoughts and inspiration to go back and, if you're not already doing so, to use feature hypotheses to get great quality features and to deliver great results in your own organizations. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to taking some questions later on during the panel discussion. Cheers. Enjoy the rest of the conference.